What was the creepiest or most paranormal thing that's ever happened to you? One afternoon in college I came back from classes and decided to sit on the couch and have a snack. After that I just passed out. I had a nightmare of some bloody-faced demonish thing screaming in my ear at the top of its lungs. Woke up and went about the rest of my day. My roommate comes back later that night and goes into his room as I'm sitting in the main living area. At some point he lets out this random startled scream which leads to me running down the hall to see what's going on. He looks at me and goes, "I swear to God someone with a bloody face just walked from your bedroom into the bathroom." I never told him about my nightmare I had earlier in the day. I didn't sleep for 2 days. Nothing ever happened again. I dropped my mug onto the floor accidentally. Heard no noise when it hit the floor. Go to pick it up and it's gone. I honestly went to bed and pondered what happened and slept feeling incredibly uncomfortable. Edit. Jesus Christ, this kicked off more than expected. Obligatory thanks for the gold. And alas, I never did find the mug. Still bothers me to this day. Bug in the Matrix type of thing. When I was in college I house sat for my parents. I'm a bit of a scaredy cat, so I locked every door leading up to the bedroom when I went to bed at night. I had the weirdest dream that someone unlocked each door and turned on every light. I felt cold and woke up to my dog barking. All of the lights in the house were on and every door open and unlocked. My dog wouldn't stop barking at nothing in the hallway. I sat in the shower with my dog and a phone the rest of night scared to death. Shower? Bad choice there. Bit of a murder hot spot. My grandmother's house had a very distinct smell. Nothing bad though. Just a grandmother's house smell. Anyway. When she came to visit us she always used to sit in a specific chair in the living room. Shortly after she passed away my father, my older sister and myself came home, and when we walked into the living room and we all smelled her. My dad said hello Ethel and the smell disappeared. I would be skeptical if just one of us experienced this, but it was all three of us. My boyfriend and I woke up in separate parts of the house in hysterics. Naked and covered in sweat. When we both finally calmed down and talked we realized we had the same dream of being surrounded by a group of black and white people with no mouths. That's gonna be a no from me, dog. A lady's voice coming from my closet asking for help. My closet door was cracked and she said, "Help me. I see you through the cracks." Every synonym for the word scared was coursing through my body. I went and checked to see if there was a woman in need of help, but nothing was in there but my clothes and shoes. When I was about 5 or 6, I was sitting on the back deck of my family home. An old farmhouse. I remember this old lady walking up the steps and going straight into the house without acknowledging me. I follow her inside to see who it is, and my mom is standing in the kitchen room right off the back deck. I ask her who's here and she gives this confused look. Around that time, the original owner of the farmhouse died and I am 100% convinced it was her. My grandfather passed away when I was 8 and my little brother was 2 or 3ish. He had this big lazy boy chair in the living room that he always planted himself in. Everyone knew this chair was Grandpa's chair. Anyway, we went down to my grandparents' house in Florida for a long weekend to attend the funeral. etc. We're all chatting the first night there in the living room. And my mom was sitting in the lazy boy chair. My little brother goes up to my mom and says Grandpa wants his chair back. My mom asks him where Grandpa is, thinking he probably didn't understand death. To which he responds, "He's right behind you." My mom bolted off that sofa immediately. Somewhat ironically, something happened to me last night. I got home from work very early in the morning. 2:30 AM. My house has an entryway or mudroom before you actually get into the house. I open the front door, step inside, close front door and proceed to try and find the key to get through the next door to get into my house. So the only light in this entryway is through the glass on the front door. The rest of the room is completely black and I can barely see my hands in front of my face. All of a sudden I start to hear this buzzing, vibrating noise behind me off to the right. House is old, so maybe just weird house noises. Still looking for the key when I notice that the noise is getting louder. Closer. And it has risen in pitch to something like if a woman was humming loudly. Maybe it's just ringing in my ear. Out of the corner of my eye I see a shadow that I thought was from light reflecting outside. Move towards me, creeping along the wall. That's when I noticed the vibrating noise was also getting closer to me, and it seemed to be coming in the same direction as the now moving shadow. I'm sheeting my pants trying to open this damn door, and when I finally do, the noise stops. The shadow disappears, and I'm hoping it was all in my head. I was sleeping in my basement, pretty much my bedroom, and I woke up at some random time in the night for no reason. Rolled over and saw a black figure. Probably around 5 feet 10 inches and typical male physique. Standing at the side of my bed. It was standing between the bed and the stairs, so there was no way to know out. I just rolled over and straight up started praying. I rolled back over and it was gone. The next morning I was in the shower, also in the basement, and the curtain was pushed to the side. Not like all the way, but it noticeably moved. Then when I got out of the shower, my cello's D string was plucked 3 times, then wrung out, which was laying against my chair in the basement. Then I went upstairs and my brother had a handprint that reached across his neck and cheek. It was too big to be his hand, but he was perfectly fine and he slept through the night uninterrupted. Yo, burn that house down, homie. 20 or so years ago, while living in NM. Driving east on HWY 60 at night between Vaughan and FT Sumner. 2 of us in the car and noticed a really bright light on the right rear side. I mean really bright. We then remembered that the train tracks were there. So we kept driving without really thinking about it. Well, the light stayed with us, which was weird because trains usually don't go that fast out there. So then my friend rolls down the window and look back to see WTH it is, and suddenly the light vanishes. Also no sound. So now we're a little freaked. We pull over to check things out. Well, a new realization sets in. There are no train tracks next to the road on this section of road, 34.4866698. Minus 104.776733. So now we're really freaked out and bolt out of there ASAP. We told our story to people at work and of course caught some grief, but that's what happened to us. Edit. Sorry. Can't get MapLink to work using my phone. We pull over to check things out. Bruh. What could go wrong? Let's split up. 2. In the house I grew up in, it always felt like you were being watched. I'd see shadows out of the corner of my eye and dark mists that would dissolve when you looked straight at them. My older sister was always scared of the attic. Especially. She would barricade the door when we were left home alone. I went in the attic quite often to get various things. It's where we kept large toy containers, old clothes and stuffed animals. And I just liked seeing what I could find. It always felt like I was being watched. Though, one time I went up there, and as I reached the top of the stairs, I saw large, translucent alien-shaped white head looking at me from behind a box. I froze, terrified, and locked eyes with it for a few seconds before it slowly lowered itself down to hide. I turned right back around and left, telling myself I had imagined it, but scared to go in the attic for years after that. I didn't tell anyone for years. My parents eventually sold the house and we moved. And I've never felt the same way anywhere else I've lived. At a nursing home. Working 10 PM to 8 AM. First, I took care of 16 ladies as a CNA on night duty. On my own. The halls have 16 rooms. With a sister hall. Same layout. Next door. Only separated by a sliding door. There's a nurse that oversees the 2 adjoining halls, but never saw her much, so it got lonely. As it was a nursing home, the ladies who live there are older and can get really sick really fast. One lady was sent to the hospital for pneumonia and was gone for days. One night, around 3 AM, another lady, same hall, neighbor to the lady at the hospital, started screaming, "Get him out of my room." Thinking a male resident had wandered from the other side of the building, I ran over to her room. But I didn't see anything. Now, this is a lady who is very with it and never has behaviors or hollers out. but she is hysterical. I figure she had a bad dream and try to calm her down. It took about 15 minutes. When I leave her room, the nurse is on the phone. The lady at the hospital had died 15 minutes ago. There are ghosts that walk the halls, and dark forms I see in certain corners of certain halls. So I guess I was never really alone. The very first hotel that I worked at, I started at the front desk and worked 3 PM to 11 PM shift. There was someone there with me from 2 PM to 10 PM. So I always had a little more than an hour where I was alone at the desk. Our kitchen closed at 10 PM, so usually by 10:15 PM. It was only the bartender and I still there. One night, it was almost 11 PM and there was a huge noise that came from the kitchen area. The bartender and I ran back there and saw that every single pot, pan, ladle, spoon, everything else that was hanging from the ceiling racks were on the ground. After our shift, we watched the camera back and there was no one in the kitchen when it happened. I have no explanation for it other than it was one of the scariest things that has ever happened to me and I could not get out of there fast enough. Sleep paralysis, or when I got sat on by a ghost while I was trying to sleep. Actually, very interesting thing to read about is a very similar vision people with sleep paralysis can have. It centers around waking up to find an old witch looking creature sitting on your chest, restricting breathing. Many times people explain a very similar looking demon in accounts dating back in history. I've actually read a theory that Henry Fuseli's The Nightmare is a depiction of a similar experience. I'm not a superstitious person, but the fact that many people describe a similar being sitting on them freaks me out. My great aunt, More, was in a nursing home about a year ago. Her husband, Paw, had died back in 2012. They have been together since she was 19. And she was in her 90s. We would visit and unfortunately watch her get worse. There was a nurse that took my mother aside and told her this may sound crazy, but I am a sensitive and there has been this man standing in the corner of the room watching her. When I see this usually means she doesn't have long. Maybe 2 days at most. My mom calls me, tells me about it, and we rush to the nursing home to give her our goodbyes. After the last person visited her, she passed away. I was driving to pick up my friend from the airport around 10 at night. His girlfriend was also with me as she wanted to see him as soon as possible. We were going down some dark, super lonely back road. I've never been that way before, but I was following good old Apple Maps. Eventually we came up alongside a train that was matched with our speed, so we couldn't see out past it on the right side of the car. After a couple minutes of that, we came upon a train yard on our left. A very spooky, very generic horror movie train yard. Nothing crazy yet, except for the fact that it went on and on and on. We probably spent 10 minutes driving at 45 miles an hour down a dark back road with a train yard on our left and a train on our right blocking the view. Eventually we made it back into society and picked up my friend from the airport. We told him all about the spooky train yard and train and were excited to drive back and show him just how much it was like a generic horror film. We drove back down the same roads. It wasn't there. We never passed a train yard. There were no trains on the tracks, now on our left. Friend's girlfriend and I flipped out. We swore up and down we drove right along the train yard for a long time. The drive home felt much shorter. I remember I was camping one time with friends from high school. We had decided to sleep around the fire, not inside of tents, since it would be nice to sleep under the stars. I fell asleep in the chair after a while, but I woke up to very loud screaming from the forest surrounding the campground. It sounded exactly like a friend of mine who was sleeping right by me, and I didn't see him in his chair anymore. I woke up the person next to me asking where he went, and then my friend who I thought was screaming was across sleeping elsewhere on a bench. I then went okay and fell asleep immediately. The next morning I was asking people about the screaming and nobody else heard it but me, and I'm not sure what made it. Sorry if bad formatting. Using mobile. Not creepy, but definitely paranormal. I was about 17. and was in my bedroom crying my eyes out over something. Home could be difficult at times. And that evening I was really upset. I really needed someone to talk to. But the only phone in the house was downstairs where my parents were, so calling a friend wasn't an option. I didn't know what to do to deal with the crap I was trying to live with and really felt that it couldn't go on for much longer. I remember thinking, please, someone, just help me. Not a prayer as such. I'm not really sure if that does any good, more sort of mental scream into the void. There was definitely no one in the room with me. It was a tiny room, and I had my back to a chest of drawers. And then I felt a something on my left shoulder. As if someone was standing behind me and resting their hand on me. I could feel the weight of each individual finger. And the palm cupping my shoulder. And I could feel warmth from it. It didn't scare me. But it was enough to stop me crying. I guess the feeling lasted for a minute or so and then just stopped. I have no idea what it was. But it was enough to calm me down. I wish I could feel it again. I'm a paranormal investigator, so I live for the creepy and paranormal. I seek it out. I've experienced a lot of creepy things. A while back we investigated the Sally house in Atchison, Kansas. This house is notorious for paranormal activity and the owners lease it to investigators. We'd already been there a few hours in the dark with no major incidents and had our equipment set up all over the place. We'd arranged toys on the floor in Sally's room. It's said that Sally will move them if you do that. We'd just finished a dinner break in the kitchen downstairs and went upstairs to check the equipment. When we got to the top of the stairs, the door to Sally's room was closed. None of us had closed it. Someone knocked on the door and asked, "Is anyone in there?" We heard a distinctly male voice say, "No. Just leave." I need to point out, we were all downstairs together. No one had gone upstairs to close the door. But any investigator will tell you in old houses doors sometimes close. No men were upstairs. We had 2 men in our group. Both downstairs. Full stop. We lived in a house a few years back. And random things would just go missing. Then they'd turn up somewhere else. We never really thought hard on it cause they were never expensive or important things. So because of this none of us ever mentioned it to each other. Fast forward and mum loses an earring. Not a huge deal, but it's a nice dangly pair she wears frequently. Maybe a month later I come home and find it perfectly laid out in the middle of the ground at the end of a high traffic hallway. It has 3 doors at the end. Take a photo and show mum when she gets back. Give her back her earring and we discuss the oddity. I mention that lately I've been misplacing random inconsequential stuff like staplers. And she looks at me and she goes, "That's weird." Me too. Our housemate gets home and we mention it and he goes, "Oh man, so weird. My razor vanished for a while and I found it back on my sink one day." So basically we're all convinced there was a friendly ghost attached to that house that just misplaced things to let us know they were present. My friends were all hanging out at my rich friend's parents' old mansion that was super extremely haunted. He had lots of enthusiastic golden retrievers that balanced out the palpable ghost-ridden environment. Other than that it was just 5 of us guys. Once in a while something small happened that we dismissed. Something moving. Weird creepy whispering. Dark areas of the house being creepy. All the furniture was from the early 20th century. But one time we were all sitting outside on his patio and hanging out chatting. My friends were smoking some cigarettes. Some hitting a roar. In the middle of conversation there was this loud ethereal operatic singing coming from slightly above us. Came out of nowhere. It was extremely bizarre and we all stopped, looked at each other. Freaked out and ran. We all sat down at the huge dinner table inside the house and tried to rationalize it but couldn't. To this day that is the only not explainable paranormal thing that has happened to me. I don't believe in ghosts or the paranormal, so this one freaked me out. My parents own a 300-acre ranch in George West, Texas. My stepdad and mother are going out of town for a week and ask me to look after the animals. I decide to spend the week there in the guest house and make myself comfortable. Now this ranch is in the middle of nowhere and the nearest neighbor is probably like 10 miles down the road. One night I finish feeding the cows and decide to take a walk in the woods behind the cow pen. It was probably like 2300ish and I'm scanning the woods with a flashlight and just walking. I remember taking my phone out because I had thought I felt it vibrate. Phantom vibration. The screen reads 2323. But there is no signal. Okay, whatever. Seconds later I hear what sounds like a woman singing a lullaby. I freak the duck out and become paralyzed due to shock. I big dig my shotgun. Always had it with me in case snakes or coyotes. Scan the woods with flashlight in hand. I don't see anything. But the singing is getting louder. I ran out of there like a little girl and went back to the guest house. Never found out what it was. I wrote this in another post. But it applies here as well. When I was in high school, I'd have my then girlfriend over to my house almost every day. Every night I'd have to drive her home. And since I was like 16 I had the whole no driving after 9 o'clock thing. So I'd drive her home at like 8:30 and get back on my road at around 9 o'clock. Whenever I'd turn off onto my road, I'd go up it about half a mile and see this girl, like a teenager, in a blue dress with a light blue ribbon tied around her waistline, walking down the road. It was around fall and she was barefoot and grinning ear to ear with mascara stains running down her face from some heavy duty crying. I told my then girlfriend the story. And she didn't really believe me. It happened the next 3 nights. And each time I just stared at her. My heart beating hard in my chest. I never stopped to see what was the deal. Who in their right mind would? The 4th night I waited until 10 o'clock to bring my girlfriend home. Then when I turned onto my road, I pulled out my phone to film the rest of the trip. I didn't see anything. And I haven't seen her since.